The palace of the Emperor Dragons rose above the clouds like a monument of fire and stone. Its towers stretched high into the sky, reflecting light in molten hues of red, gold, and orange. Every wall, every corridor, and every hall seemed alive with history, filled with the wisdom of generations. Yet, among all its grandeur, the most unusual sight was not the golden throne or the floating gardens, it was the silence. The emperor's twin sons, known throughout the empire as the Airlings, had never spoken a word. The people whispered about it behind closed doors, spreading rumors that the twins were cursed or that their minds were far beyond comprehension. Some scholars speculated they were mute by choice, observing the world silently to master the art of thought and strategy. Others thought it was a test of patience for the emperor himself. Whatever the truth, their silence was complete and absolute. The Airlings were identical in every physical way. Their scales shimmered with an iridescent silver under the palace lights, and their eyes glowed faintly in colors that shifted with emotion. One could see fear, curiosity, joy, or anger reflected in them, yet never a single word escaped their lips. Instead, they communicated in subtle gestures, tilting heads, flicks of the tail, changes in the glow of their eyes. For most of the court, these gestures were indecipherable, leaving the dragon's most trusted advisors frustrated and uneasy. Into this quiet, intimidating world stepped Kale, a human from a distant colony. Humans were not considered dangerous or powerful in dragon society. They were small, fragile, and far weaker than even a young dragon. Yet, humans had one thing dragons could not fully understand: unpredictability. Kale had been sent to the palace as a servant, tasked with observing and learning from the Emperor Dragons. But he had no idea how much his presence would shake the balance of the imperial court. Kale entered the palace gates under the bright light of dawn, carrying nothing but a small satchel of supplies. He was tall for a human, with dark hair and eyes that reflected curiosity and determination. The guards watched him warily, their claws resting on the hilts of their ceremonial swords, while the palace staff whispered among themselves. Humans had never served in such a prominent position. It was unusual, even risky. The first day was overwhelming. The palace was enormous, with corridors so long that it took KL hours to walk from the outer halls to the central courtyard. Every room was decorated with shimmering scales, golden murals, and glowing crystal chandeliers. The air smelled faintly of smoke and spice, a scent the dragons used to mark their territory and maintain their health. KL had read about dragon customs, but nothing in the books compared to the experience of being in their presence. Finally, KL arrived at the Airlings' chamber. The twins were perched on a raised platform, their wings folded neatly against their backs. They studied him with curiosity, their glowing eyes scanning him from head to toe. KL stopped in the center of the room and bowed respectfully, remembering the human etiquette he had been taught. "Greetings, your highnesses," KL said softly, unsure if they could understand him. The twins remained still, their eyes tracking his every movement. There was no reaction, no acknowledgement beyond the faint twitch of a tail. Kale spent the next few hours performing small chores, arranging pillows, delivering fresh water, and cleaning the platform where the twins rested. He noticed how carefully he had to move, mindful of the dragon's enormous claws and sharp teeth. A single wrong step could be fatal. But Kale also noticed something fascinating. The twins were watching not just his actions, but his expressions, his breathing, and even the slightest twitch of his fingers. They were studying him. At first, Kyle felt fear. The silence of the twins pressed on him, making him doubt his own presence in the palace. But gradually, he began to observe patterns. One twin, whom Kale later learned was named Rin, would tilt his head slightly when curious. The other, known as Kor, would flare his wings ever so slightly when irritated or excited. There was a rhythm to their gestures, a subtle language that humans rarely noticed. Kale felt a spark of hope. Perhaps, he thought, If he could understand their rhythm, he could communicate with them in ways no other servant had tried. Over the next week, Kale continued his work, spending more time observing than serving. He tried speaking softly, using the human words he knew. But the twins did not respond. He tried moving in certain ways, mimicking the gestures they made toward each other. But still, there was only silence. Yet, he refused to give up. Humans had a way of persevering against odds, a stubbornness that even dragons could not always predict. One evening, after the daily chores were done, Kale noticed something unusual. The twins were sitting closer than usual, their heads nearly touching. They were watching him with intense focus, their eyes glowing a faint blue instead of the usual silver. Kale paused, unsure if he should move closer or retreat. But then he remembered something his father had once told him. Sometimes, understanding comes from daring to step forward when others step back. Kale took a deep breath and did something completely unexpected. He began to hum a tune, a simple human melody his mother had taught him long ago. The sound was soft, almost fragile, but it carried a rhythm and warmth that was entirely different from anything the twins had experienced. Rin flinched at first, the slightest ripple passing through his wings. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he mirrored Kale's hum, matching the rhythm with a quiet vibration in his throat. Kor hesitated, one claw lifted slightly as if in thought, and then followed his brother. The air in the chamber seemed to shift, charged with a tension that was both electric and fragile. Kale's heart raced. He had not expected this. The twins had never reacted to anything like this before. It was as if they were hearing a language beyond words, a melody that touched something deep within them. For the first time, Kale felt a connection. Fragile, but undeniable. The palace walls seemed to hold their breath as Kale continued the tune, the twins matching him, note for note. For hours, they hummed together. A strange harmony that blended human and dragon in a way no one had ever imagined. Outside the chamber, palace staff whispered in astonishment. Some claimed it was magic. Others swore they had seen the impossible. Human and dragon speaking a language of sound beyond words. When the sun rose the next day, Kale awoke to find the twins watching him again. Their glowing eyes calm but attentive. Rin blinked slowly, and Kor tilted his head. They made no sound. Yet Kale could feel a message passing silently through the air. We remember. We trust you. It was a small victory, but for Kale, it was monumental. He realized that the twins' silence was not a curse, nor was it weakness. It was a choice. They had been waiting for someone unpredictable. Someone who could see beyond their world of power and tradition. And now, perhaps, that someone had arrived. As Kale continued his work, he knew the journey ahead would be difficult. The Emperor would be skeptical. The court would doubt him. And the twins, well, the twins could stop responding at any moment. Yet Kale did not falter. He had learned something essential. Sometimes, to awaken the impossible, all one needed was patience, courage, and a willingness to do the unimaginable. And so, in the quiet halls of the Dragon Palace, a human servant began the task that no dragon had ever attempted: to teach the Emperor Dragon's silent twin sons to speak, and perhaps, to change the future of the Empire forever. The sun rose over the palace, casting golden light across the spires and courtyards. Within the Emperor Dragon's chambers, Kale moved quietly, carrying a tray of fruits and water for the twin princes. Despite the palace's grandeur, there was still a sense of tension in the air. The silence of the twins pressed on him, but it was no longer empty. It felt alive, waiting for him to take the next step. Kale set down the tray on a low platform. Rin and Kor were already awake, perched side by side like statues of silver and blue scales. Their eyes glimmered as they watched him, tracking every careful movement. Kale felt both fear and exhilaration. The memory of last night's humming session, when the twins had echoed his melody, still lingered in his mind. He knew that something unusual was forming a bridge between human and dragon that no one had imagined possible. He took a deep breath and began speaking softly, reciting a story he had learned as a child on his home colony. It was a simple tale about a small human boy who faced a giant, dangerous creature, but one not through strength, but through cleverness and kindness. As he spoke, he watched the twins closely. At first, there was no reaction. The story seemed to flow past them like a gentle wind. But then, Kor shifted slightly, his eyes flicking with curiosity. Rin tilted his head, leaning forward in a way that showed attention. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, yet Kale's heart leaped. The twins were listening, not just hearing, but truly observing, thinking, learning. Over the next few days, Kale experimented with different methods to reach them. He hummed melodies, told stories, moved in careful patterns, and even tried mimicking the gestures the twins used with each other. The results were slow, but unmistakable. The twins responded, often in tiny ways. A flick of a tail, a faint change in the glow of their eyes, a slight tilt of the head. The court noticed the change. Advisors whispered behind Kale's back. A human influencing the Emperor's sons? Impossible, one remarked. Another shook their head, muttering, "The twins will never speak, no matter what he does." He had learned long ago that humans survived against impossible odds. Not by listening to others, but by daring to act when everyone else hesitated. One evening, Kale tried something new. He had found a small set of human instruments, a wooden flute, and a tiny drum hidden among his belongings. No dragon had ever seen or heard them before. Carefully, he played a soft melody on the flute, keeping it gentle, almost like a whisper. Rin's wings shifted slightly, and Kor leaned forward as if trying to understand the strange sound. Then Kale added a rhythm with the drum, tapping gently with his fingers. The twins' reactions grew more obvious. They mirrored his movements in tiny ways, tapping claws lightly on the floor, flicking tails in time with the beat, and vibrating their throats softly to match the tones. For the first time, the palace walls seemed to hum with a new kind of energy, human and dragon, interacting in perfect, if silent, harmony. Kale realized something profound. The twins' silence was not a lack of ability, but a form of learning. They had been observing the world in their own way, waiting for the right stimulus. Humans, with their unpredictable creativity and emotional depth, were a language the twins could not resist. It was not words they needed. It was connection. Encouraged, Kale began to combine methods. He would hum, tell stories, tap rhythms, and use small gestures all at once. The twins responded in ways more noticeable each day. Sometimes, they would lean close to him, following his hands with their glowing eyes. Sometimes, they would mimic his breathing or posture. Even the Emperor began to notice subtle changes, though he would not yet admit it publicly. The turning point came one night during a quiet thunderstorm. Rain tapped against the palace's crystal windows, and lightning illuminated the twin princes' chamber in bright flashes. Kale had been preparing a story about bravery and trust, hoping to push the twins just a little further. He began speaking, his voice soft but confident, weaving a tale of a young hero who risked everything to save a friend. The twins leaned closer than ever before, their bodies vibrating gently in time with Kale's voice. Then, something extraordinary happened. Rin let out a soft, almost imperceptible vibration from his throat, a sound neither fully dragon nor fully human. Kor followed, matching the rhythm. Kale's heart skipped. It was a form of communication, not words yet, but a bridge had begun to form. Kale knelt carefully, keeping his hands visible, and continued his story. Each word, each note of melody, was mirrored by the twins in subtle ways. Their eyes glimmered with comprehension, their bodies moving in small, synchronized gestures. Kyle realized that the twins were learning not from his words alone, but from his persistence, his presence, his very way of being. The next morning, Kyle awoke to find the twins sitting silently, yet attentively, by the platform where he usually placed his supplies. They did not speak, but there was a noticeable difference. Their eyes followed him more openly, and they occasionally mimicked his actions almost immediately. Kale understood. Trust had begun to form. The palace staff began to talk quietly among themselves. Some were amazed, some fearful. "The Humyn is teaching them," one whispered. "No human has ever influenced the airlings," said another. But Kale paid no attention. He knew that humans were most powerful not in strength, but in creativity, adaptability, and the ability to connect across differences. Kale's growing bond with the twins did not go unnoticed by the Emperor. One afternoon, the great dragon appeared in the chamber without warning, his massive wings casting shadows across the floor. Kale froze. The Emperor's gaze swept over him, sharp and unyielding. "Humyn," he said, his voice deep and resonant. "What are you doing with my sons?" Kale swallowed, but held his ground. "Your Highness, I am trying to help them. To connect. They are listening, learning, and responding in ways they could not before. I mean no harm." The Emperor's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, the air seemed to thicken. Then, unexpectedly, he inclined his massive head slightly. "Continue," he said, "but be careful. They are my sons. Their minds are precious." Kyle bowed deeply, relief washing over him. He understood the stakes. The Emperor was allowing him to continue, but only under observation. One wrong move could end his presence in the palace, or worse. Over the following days, Kyle refined his techniques. He noticed patterns. Rin responded more to melody, while Kor was more influenced by rhythm. Sometimes, they would respond immediately. Other times they would take hours or even days to show the smallest sign of acknowledgement. Patience, Kale realized, was more powerful than any sword or spell. One afternoon, Kyle attempted something new. He drew a simple diagram on a parchment, showing the flow of a story. Beginning, challenge, solution. Then he acted it out with gestures, moving slowly to represent the hero, the danger, and the resolution. The twins followed each movement, their eyes glowing brighter, their claws tapping in rhythm with his gestures. Kyle laughed softly, amazed at their precision. It was as if they were learning the very concept of storytelling itself. The palace began to feel less intimidating to Kale. The silence of the twins, once oppressive, now held promise. He realized that humans, by nature, had a strength that dragons did not. The ability to innovate, to persist, and to connect in ways beyond raw power or tradition. The twins were discovering this too, their silence beginning to crack under the influence of curiosity, rhythm, and human ingenuity. One evening, as Kale left the chamber, Rin tilted his head toward him. It was a simple gesture, but for Kale, it spoke volumes: recognition, trust, and perhaps the first hint of friendship. Kor, sitting beside his brother, mirrored the gesture. Kale's chest swelled with hope. The impossible connection was forming, and he could feel the first threads of a bond that might change the Empire forever. That night, Kale lay awake in his small quarters, thinking of the twins. They had begun to respond, to learn, to recognize the human among them, not as weak, but as something different, something unique. He knew the journey ahead would be long, that the Emperor's skepticism would not disappear, and that the court would continue to whisper. But for the first time, Kale truly believed it was possible. The silent twin sons of the Emperor dragons might speak, and a human servant could be the key. And so, in the quiet palace under the rising moon, KL made a silent promise to himself. He would continue, no matter the danger or doubt. He would unlock the voices of the twins, not with power or fear, but with patience, creativity, and the unimaginably human ability to inspire connection where none seemed possible. The Emperor's chambers were vast and silent, the walls lined with shimmering murals that depicted the great victories of dragonkind. Kale stood nervously in the doorway, his hands empty, his heart pounding. Today, he had been summoned to face the Emperor himself. The air seemed thicker than usual, heavy with the authority of the great dragon who had ruled the empire for centuries. "You have been spending much time with my sons," the Emperor said, his voice deep and resonant. His eyes glowed like molten gold, fixed on Kale with an intensity that made the human shrink slightly. "Tell me, Humyn, what are you doing with them?" Kale swallowed, steadying himself. "Your Highness, I am trying to help them communicate. They are learning, observing, and responding in ways no one else has seen. I believe I can help them speak." The Emperor's gaze did not soften. "Speak? My sons have never spoken in all their years. Many have tried, yet they remain silent. You claim to succeed where others have failed. Why should I believe a human could accomplish what dragons cannot?" Kael squared his shoulders. "Because humans are unpredictable, Your Highness. We do not always follow rules or tradition. We can see patterns others miss. I have found ways to reach them that no one else thought possible." The Emperor narrowed his eyes. "Words are not enough. Your methods may awaken something you do not understand. You will show me your work. If you fail, the consequences will be yours alone." Kael nodded, swallowing hard. The weight of the Emperor's words pressed down on him, but he felt a surge of determination. Humans had survived impossible odds by facing challenges, not avoiding them. He would not back down now. Returning to the twins' chamber, Kael found Rin and Kor waiting as usual, their glowing eyes fixed on him. He felt a mixture of fear and hope. If he could unlock the twins' speech, it would not just change their lives, it could change the entire Empire's view of humans. Kael set down a small table with new instruments he had made from human materials. A wooden xylophone, a set of small bells, and a thin drum. He had designed each to be subtle, safe for the twins' claws, and capable of producing a wide range of sounds. He hoped the instruments, combined with gestures and stories, would push the twins further along the path of expression. He began with a story, simple but vivid. It was about a clever fox who outwitted a powerful dragon not with strength, but with cleverness and understanding. As he spoke, he tapped rhythms on the drum and xylophone, moving slowly in gestures that represented the fox's cunning and bravery. The twins watched closely. Rin's tail flicked in time with the drum, and Kor leaned forward, imitating Kael's hand movements. The palace had never seen such synchronization between a human and dragons, and even Kael was surprised by how quickly they adapted. Kael encouraged them further, adding layers of melody with the bells and humming softly to tie it all together. Rin responded with a soft vibration in his throat, the first real attempt at producing a sound beyond mere movement. Kor followed, his own vibration slightly offbeat but deliberate. Kael's heart leaped. They were communicating not with words yet, but with rhythm, tone, and intent. Days passed, and Kael pushed them carefully, aware that the Emperor was watching from afar. He discovered that each twin responded differently. Rin reacted to melody, emotion, and subtle changes in tone, while Kor responded to rhythm, structure, and pattern. By combining these approaches, Kael could coax small, intentional sounds from them, almost like the first words of a child learning to speak. The challenge, however, was greater than Kael expected. The Emperor, skeptical and cautious, demanded proof. One morning, the great dragon appeared in the twins' chamber with several advisors, their eyes fixed on Kale. "Show me," the emperor said, "that your methods can awaken true speech, not merely imitation. If you succeed, you may continue. If you fail." He did not finish the threat, but Kale felt it in the silence. Kale nodded and began the demonstration. He told a story of a human hero who had traveled across dangerous lands to save a village. He combined gestures, rhythm, and melody, moving slowly and deliberately. The twins watched, their eyes glowing brighter than usual. For the first time, Rin and Kor moved almost perfectly in sync with him, their bodies vibrating gently in response to his tones. Then it happened. Rin let out a soft, clear sound like a note from a bell. Kor followed, matching the vibration. Kale's hands trembled as he continued, and the twins began producing multiple tones, creating a strange harmony that filled the chamber. The emperor's eyes widened, advisors gasped quietly. It was unlike anything the palace had ever witnessed. The emperor leaned closer. "Interesting," he murmured. "You have reached them, Humyn. But can they understand you? Can they truly speak?" Kale nodded. "I believe they can, Your Highness. They are learning, responding, and even initiating sounds. They are beginning to express themselves." The emperor studied the twins. "They are young, but not naive. If you can awaken speech in them, you will have achieved what no dragon has ever managed. But be warned. Their minds are sharp. They will test you, push you, and even deceive you." Kale felt the weight of responsibility settle over him. The twins were more than children. They were heirs to a vast empire, and their minds were filled with intelligence, instinct, and potential beyond human comprehension. Every interaction, every gesture, every story he told mattered. He realized that helping them speak was not merely about language, it was about trust, patience, and understanding a species entirely unlike his own. Over the following week, Kale experimented with new techniques. He combined movement, melody, rhythm, and storytelling in ways that required careful attention. Rin and Kor were unpredictable, sometimes responding immediately, sometimes ignoring him entirely. Kale had to remain observant at all times, noting the smallest changes in their behavior. A flick of the tail, a subtle change in eye glow, a vibration of the throat. He also discovered something surprising. The twins had their own form of communication, a silent language of gestures and vibrations. They would watch each other, exchange tiny signals, and even coordinate responses to Kale's actions. It was as if they were learning from him, but also teaching each other. The process was mutual, a dance of intelligence that humans rarely experienced with other species. Kale grew more confident, but he also realized the risk. One wrong move, one tone off-beat, one misstep in storytelling could break the fragile connection he had built. He had to earn not only their attention, but their trust. And yet, each small success fueled him. The twins' eyes glimmered with curiosity. Their bodies vibrated in response to his melodies, and the palace slowly began to recognize that something remarkable was unfolding. The turning point came during a demonstration for the emperor. Kale had prepared a complex story, combining rhythm, melody, gestures, and emotion. The twins were attentive, their eyes glowing with focus. As Kale moved through the story, Rin let out a sequence of soft tones, and Kor followed, creating a harmonious pattern. The sound was neither fully dragon nor fully human, but it carried meaning, emotion, and intent. The emperor's massive form leaned forward, his eyes wide. Advisors whispered, some in awe, others in fear. Kale's heart raced as he continued, weaving the twins' sounds into the story. The chamber vibrated with the music of two species learning to speak together. When the demonstration ended, Rin and Kor sat quietly, their eyes fixed on Kale. The Emperor studied them in silence, then turned to Kale. "You have done what I did not expect." They are responding, but not yet speaking words. "You have proven progress. Continue, Humyn. But remember, the challenge is far from over." Their minds are sharp, and the road ahead will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Kale bowed deeply, relief and determination flooding him. The twins' eyes glimmered, almost as if they understood the significance of the moment. Trust had been built, connection had been made, and a new path had begun, a path where humans could reach even the most silent and powerful minds in the galaxy. As he left the chamber, Kale reflected on what he had learned. Humans had a unique gift: the ability to innovate, to persist, and to connect across differences. Dragons, despite their power, were bound by tradition and expectation. It was the human unpredictability that allowed him to unlock even a fraction of the twins' potential. And he knew, deep in his heart, that this was only the beginning. The twins remained silent for now, but Kale felt something he had never felt before: the thrill of possibility. They were learning, they were observing, and they were ready to speak when the moment was right. And when that moment came, Kale would be ready to help them do the unimaginable. The grand hall of the Emperor Dragon's palace was alive with anticipation. Servants moved quietly along the polished floors, arranging decorations and instruments, while advisors whispered nervously in corners. Word had spread of the human servant, Kale, who had begun to reach the silent twin princes. Now, a demonstration was to be held, a display of progress that could either astonish the court or confirm the doubts of centuries. Kale entered the chamber carrying a small wooden platform on which rested the instruments he had made: the xylophone, the small bells, and a delicate flute. Rin and Kor were already perched near the raised throne of the Emperor, their wings folded neatly, their eyes glowing faintly in anticipation. For the first time, Kale felt the full weight of responsibility. Today was more than practice. It was the moment when the twins might speak in a way the entire empire could witness. "Stay calm," Kale whispered to himself. "This is about trust, not force." The Emperor watched from his throne, his golden eyes scanning Kale and the twins. "Proceed," he commanded, his voice calm but filled with authority. The advisors, who had gathered behind him, leaned forward in anticipation. None of them had ever seen a human influence dragonkind in this way. Kale began gently, humming the soft melody he had used to reach the twins before. The sound floated through the hall like a ribbon of light, delicate and inviting. Rin's eyes flickered as he leaned slightly forward, matching Kale's hum with a vibration that resonated through his chest. Kor, ever the careful observer, hesitated for a moment, then joined with a soft, uneven note. Encouraged, Kale picked up the flute and played a simple, warm tune. The twins responded immediately, mirroring his rhythm with subtle throat vibrations and movements of their claws. The sound was not human, not dragon, it was something in between, a bridge between two species that no one had thought possible. Kale moved closer, adding gestures to the melody. He acted out a story with his hands, each movement corresponding to a note, a rhythm, a part of the tale. Rin and Kor followed, leaning, tilting, and vibrating in harmony with him. The court watched in stunned silence. Some whispered, others simply stared, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. Then, Kale took a deep breath and began speaking softly. His voice carried the story of a small human boy who faced overwhelming odds not with strength, but with creativity, courage, and compassion. As he spoke, Rin and Kor responded with increasingly complex vibrations. Their tones began to form patterns, almost like words, and Kale recognized something extraordinary. The twins were beginning to combine sound and meaning. The Emperor leaned forward, his massive wings brushing the floor. "This is unprecedented," he murmured. The advisors nodded, their eyes wide with disbelief. No dragon had ever exhibited such responsiveness to a human before. KL realized the significance. This was more than communication. It was connection. The twins were understanding, interpreting, and expressing, not just mimicking, but creating. KL continued, introducing new elements into the story. He tapped rhythms on the small drum, allowing the twins to match the tempo. He rang the bells at moments of tension, signaling emotion. He adjusted his voice, softening for sorrow, strengthening for courage. With each layer, the twins responded more clearly, their sounds more deliberate, their gestures more expressive. Then came the moment Kale had been preparing for, though he had doubted it would arrive so soon. He paused in the story, letting the silence stretch just long enough to invite response. Slowly, deliberately, Rin let out a clear sound, a note that resembled a word, though its tone was unfamiliar. Kor followed, producing a complementary note, forming a sequence that carried intent, rhythm, and feeling. Kale's heart raced. The twins were speaking, if not with human words, then with a structured sound that conveyed meaning. It was the first breakthrough the palace had ever seen. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, but not with anger, rather with awe. The advisors whispered, some with disbelief, some with hope. Encouraged, Kale moved forward, combining gestures, melody, and rhythm with careful speech. The twins responded in a pattern that grew more complex with each attempt. They were not simply echoing. They were choosing sounds, forming sequences, and even interrupting Kale's story at moments to add their own tones. The room seemed alive, resonating with a harmony that no one had thought possible between species so different. The Emperor finally spoke, his voice booming across the hall. Humyn, what you have done is unimaginable. But can they speak words? Can they express themselves fully? Kale nodded, determination shining in his eyes. I believe they can, Your Highness. They are learning. They are forming concepts, expressing thought. Words will come when they are ready. Today, they have taken the first step. Then, almost as if in response to Kale's words, Rin's note shifted, forming a pattern that matched the rhythm of a word he had used earlier. Kor followed, complementing the sound perfectly. Kale's chest swelled with emotion. It was subtle, fragile, but undeniable. The twins had begun to create language. The court erupted in whispered excitement. Some advisors crossed themselves in disbelief. Others stared at the twins with admiration. The Emperor leaned back on his throne, golden eyes glowing, but his expression was unreadable. Kale, however, knew the truth. He had done what no human or dragon had ever done before. He had reached the silent twin sons. He had inspired them to speak. Kale approached them carefully, kneeling to be closer to their level. He spoke softly, continuing the story, tapping rhythms, adding melody. Rin and Kor responded more fluidly than ever before, producing patterns of sound that were unmistakably deliberate. Each note carried meaning, emotion, and intent. Kale smiled. You're doing it. You're speaking. Not just with your voices, but with your minds. This is more than anyone could have imagined. The twins' eyes glimmered, reflecting understanding, trust, and perhaps even joy. It was a moment KL would never forget, a moment when silence gave way to communication, when human creativity bridged the impossible gap between species, when the unimaginable became reality. Over the following hours, Kale continued the exercises, carefully guiding the twins. They began to combine their sounds into sequences that resembled words more closely, experimenting with tone and rhythm. Kale realized that each attempt was not only communication, but learning a teaching of language itself, step by step, between species. Finally, the Emperor spoke again, his deep voice echoing across the hall. Humyn, You have proven what none could have believed possible. My sons, they have begun to speak, and it is because of you. Number send. Number send. Kale bowed deeply. Your Highness, it is not me alone. The twins are learning themselves. They are capable beyond what anyone imagined. I am only guiding them, helping them see what is possible. The Emperor regarded him silently for a long moment. Then, he spoke, his tone softer, almost approving. Continue. But remember, what you are doing is delicate. Their minds are precious. You must tread carefully, or all progress could be lost. Kale nodded, understanding the gravity of the task. He had reached the point where the impossible had begun. The twins, once silent and inscrutable, were now speaking in ways that combined thought, sound, and emotion. And he knew that the next steps would determine not only their future, but the future of human-dragon relations across the Empire. That night, Kale sat quietly outside the twins' chamber, reflecting on the events of the day. The twins were asleep, their wings tucked neatly, their eyes closed. But he knew their minds were active, dreaming, processing. He had reached a new level of connection, one that required trust, patience, and courage. And he realized something more. Humans were capable of shaping the world in ways dragons could not through strength, but through creativity, empathy, and understanding. Kale whispered a silent promise to himself. He would continue. He would nurture the twins' ability to speak, guide their learning, and ensure that the bridge he had built between human and dragon would endure. The Empire had witnessed the unimaginable, and this was only the beginning. The twin princes, once silent, were now awakening to a world of words, ideas, and collaboration. And at the center of this transformation stood a human servant who dared to do what no one else could. The sun rose over the Emperor Dragon's palace, casting long golden rays across the spires and terraces. The twin princes, Rin and Kor, were already awake, their glowing eyes tracking Kale as he entered the chamber. Today was different. Today was not practice or experimentation. It was the first time they would speak fully, intentionally, and publicly. Kale felt a mixture of excitement and nervousness. The past weeks had been a journey of patience, creativity, and careful observation. The twins had responded to melody, rhythm, and story, gradually learning the flow of human language. Now, with the Emperor and the court watching, the moment of true expression had arrived. The Emperor, seated on his golden throne, observed quietly. Advisors, scholars, and a few select nobles filled the hall. All eyes were on Kale and the twins. Murmurs ran through the crowd. Humans had never influenced dragonkind in such a way before. Many doubted the success. Some feared what might happen, and others were simply in awe. Kale stepped forward, his heart steady despite the pressure. "Your Highnesses," he said, bowing slightly to the Emperor. "Today the twins will speak, if they are ready. They have learned from rhythm, melody, and story. But now, it is their choice to express themselves fully." Rin and Kor moved forward, side by side. Their scales shimmered in the sunlight, silver and blue, blending like fire and sky. They tilted their heads, observing Kale. And then, the room. Silence fell as the court held its collective breath. The twins were about to speak for the first time in centuries, in the presence of the entire empire. Kale began with a gentle melody, humming softly, tapping a rhythm on the drum. The twins mirrored his actions, creating harmony that filled the chamber. Then, carefully, Kale spoke a few simple words, guiding the twins with tone and gesture. And then it happened. Rin spoke. His voice was soft, trembling, yet clear. "Human." The word hung in the air like a spark, and everyone in the hall froze. It was the first human word the twins had ever produced intentionally. KL smiled gently, nodding for encouragement. Kor followed, his tone slightly deeper, melodic. Friend. The court erupted in whispers, some gasps, and others stunned silence. The emperor leaned forward, his golden eyes glowing. He had seen countless miracles, battles, and discoveries. But this was something entirely new. The twins were speaking, and the words were deliberate, meaningful, and understandable. Kale continued, guiding them carefully. Can you tell the court who you are? He asked, softly. Rin straightened his wings slightly, taking a deep breath. We are the sons of the Emperor, he said, his voice gaining confidence with each syllable. We have learned. Kor nodded, adding, we speak because of Humyn. Their voices resonated together, forming a rhythm that sounded almost musical. The audience watched in awe. A Humyn had inspired dragonkind to speak words that had never been heard in the Empire before. The Emperor's massive form seemed to shift with pride and amazement. It is true, he said, his voice echoing through the hall. My sons, they speak, and they speak because of you, Humyn. He turned his gaze to Kale, eyes softened with approval. You have done what none have achieved. You have awakened not only their voices, but their trust. You have bridged worlds. Kale bowed deeply, overwhelmed with emotion. Your Highness, it is not me alone. The twins are capable beyond what anyone imagined. I only guided them. The twins stepped forward, speaking in unison now. We choose to learn and to share. Their voices carried clarity and strength, resonating through the chamber. Humans can teach us new ways to see the world. The court erupted into applause, some hesitant, others jubilant. Advisors and nobles whispered excitedly, acknowledging the significance of the moment. Humans, once considered fragile and weak, had demonstrated creativity, patience, and understanding powerful enough to influence the most revered dragons in the galaxy. Kale stepped back, letting the twins take the spotlight. They were still young, still learning, but their confidence had grown. Their words carried meaning, emotion, and a newfound authority. The Empire had witnessed a historic breakthrough, one that could reshape relationships between species across the stars. The Emperor rose, his massive wings stretching across the chamber. Let it be known, he said, his deep voice commanding attention, that humans are not merely small and fragile. They possess qualities that even dragons cannot fully comprehend: creativity, adaptability, and the courage to act when others hesitate. This human servant has proven that greatness comes in many forms. 2022. 2020 2020 2020. Kale felt his chest swell with pride. He had survived impossible odds, gained the trust of the silent twin sons, and shown the Empire the strength of human ingenuity. Yet he also knew this was only the beginning. The twins would continue to learn, and the human-dragon relationship could grow stronger than ever. After the ceremony, Kyle was led to a private audience with the Emperor and the twins. Rin and Kor spoke freely now, their voices confident and expressive. They asked questions about human lands, culture, and philosophy, eager to understand perspectives beyond their own species. Kale answered, guiding them with patience, stories, and gestures that blended dragon and human understanding. The Emperor watched quietly, smiling with a mix of pride and wonder. You have opened their minds and hearts, he said to Kale. They will remember this lesson for all their lives. And so will the Empire. Kale nodded, humbled by the words. It is a gift, Your Highness. Not just mine, but theirs, the twins' willingness to learn, to trust, and to take the first step into a new way of thinking. In the weeks that followed, The twins' progress continued at an astonishing pace. They began reading and understanding written language, practicing speech, and exploring ideas beyond dragon tradition. Kale guided them, but their curiosity drove them further, learning not only words, but empathy, creativity, and problem-solving. The palace staff began to treat Kale differently. He was no longer merely a servant. He was a teacher, an ambassador, and a bridge between two species. He walked the halls with quiet confidence, earning respect from dragons and humans alike. His success inspired others to see the value of cooperation, patience, and understanding. One afternoon, Kale sat with the twins in the palace gardens, a place of floating flowers and crystal fountains. Rin looked at him, eyes bright. "Kale," he said, "you showed us a new way to see the world, not just with words, but with thought, feeling, and trust." Kor nodded. "We will teach others as you taught us. Humans and dragons can learn together." Kale smiled, heart full. "That's exactly right. You are capable of great things, both of you. And the Empire will see it too." The Emperor, observing from a distance, felt a sense of pride unlike any before. His sons had learned to speak, to think, and to trust, not through fear or power, but through patience, creativity, and the guidance of a human. It was proof that greatness could come from unexpected places, that even the smallest being could inspire change in the most powerful. As days turned to weeks, the human colony KL had come from began to send envoys to the palace. They were welcomed not as visitors, but as partners. Kale became the first human ambassador in the Dragon Empire, symbolizing a new era where humans and dragons could learn, teach, and grow together. The Empire changed subtly but profoundly. Humans were no longer seen as fragile or weak. They were recognized for their intelligence, creativity, and courage. Dragons, even the oldest and wisest, learned to value unpredictability, collaboration, and empathy. And at the center of it all were the twin princes, once silent, now speaking boldly, and a human servant who had done the unimaginable. One evening, KL stood on a terrace overlooking the palace. The sky was painted in gold and purple, and the floating gardens shimmered in the fading light. Rin and Kor approached him, their voices confident and warm. "Kale," Rin said, "thank you. You changed everything." Kor added, "We will never forget the human who showed us the unimaginable." Kale smiled, feeling a sense of fulfillment he had never known. "You two did it yourselves. I only helped guide you. The rest was yours." The twins nodded, understanding the truth. Together, they had learned, grown, and taken the first step toward a future of collaboration, trust, and shared knowledge. The Empire, too, had witnessed the dawn of a new era, a time when humans and dragons could create, teach, and inspire one another in ways never imagined before. And so, in the halls of the Emperor Dragon's palace, a human servant became more than a guide. He became a symbol of possibility, a bridge between species, and a testament to the power of courage, creativity, and trust. The silence was gone. Words filled the halls, ideas flowed, and the Empire embraced a future where even the impossible could become reality.